Okay, perhaps this title is a bit inflammatory, but I honestly do feel this way. I'm sorry, Hollow Knight fans. Ori and the Blind Forest is a Metroidvania-style game, and honestly, outside of an indie look and feel, that's about where the similarities between it and Hollow Knight end. While Hollow Knight focuses more on combat with a lower emphasis on platforming, Ori really takes the inverse approach here with a high focus on platforming and much lower focus on combat. Hollow Knight has several boss fights that offer different unique challenges, while in Ori the equivalent of the boss fights are a few very difficult platforming sections where you have a certain amount of time to escape the area you're in, which I think perfectly captures the main difference between these two games. The combat in Ori is really quite simple. I mean, it's just spamming the button and trying to avoid getting hit by enemy attacks. Hollow Knight takes a more traditional Metroid-style approach with its boss fights and battles. Again, the emphasis in Ori is really not on killing your enemies, but really on surviving to the next area. If that involves having to murk some dudes along the way, then so be it. But they're usually more of an obstacle rather than the goal. Ori's quite unique with its saving system, which I've never seen another game implement. You can create save points throughout the game where your character respawns after you perish, but you also have to use energy when you're creating these checkpoints, and that energy isn't always easy to replenish. It makes it so you have to be very careful and strategic with placing down save points. Many times I placed down save points too early and too often, and I was stuck having to redo portions of the game over and over and over just to get back to the difficult part where I kept getting fucking murked. This is one of the ways that I think Ori does eclipse Hollow Knight. Dying in that game does not feel good. You lose your money, which obviously hurts, but you also get sent all the way back to wherever you last saved, which could be super far away and involve risking it all to get back to where you died. Is the money worth recovering? Or should you go somewhere else for the time being and come back once you've prepped more for that section? Ori is far more forgiving in that manner. If you're a person who liked Hollow Knight but found that aspect of it just too much for you, just a little too difficult, definitely consider Ori as an alternative. On the other hand, the trade-off is that in Ori, you're gonna die a lot more. Like a lot more. I died like 100 times or something before I beat the game. I think more than that. The story and feel of Ori is just something else, man. You live in this cute little forest with a fat chicken woman thing. The beast is foul, if I'm being honest with you. But the forest feels vibrant and alive. It's a warm and inviting place that feels resplendent and vibrant. And then disaster strikes. The forest is destroyed, and the vibe of everything changes. Just like that. In this new forest, you feel lonely. You feel despair as the land decays around you. You feel the pain of the few remaining people that live in this forest. You want to save them and return this place to what it once was. I would even say in certain ways that you as a character, as Ori, are a little bit just a tad morally gray in this game. I want to avoid spoilers in this video because I think the twists in this game are genuinely good, and I really suggest you pick this game up and give it a play. If you're unemployed, number one, I envy you, and number two, you could breeze through this bitch in a day. It's like 20 bucks on Steam. What's stopping you? Oh right, you're unemployed. Fucking loser, get a job. Some of the platform in this game is tricky, man. There were definitely a couple spots where, I'll be honest, I did have to look it up and see how it needed to be done. Like the part where the owl is looking for you and you have to hide behind stuff. I embarrassingly forgot that Ori can drop through certain types of platforms, so I just kept running into this one area and freaking out trying to find a hiding spot, then just getting insta-murked. It's a miracle my controller survived that one, to be honest with you. The escape sections in the game that I touched on earlier are exciting challenges. Once you restore these aspects of the forest, you suddenly need to GTFO before you're killed by the strong elements in that place. You don't get to save anywhere during these sections, given there is no safe place to save. So if you die, it restarts you. Normally that can be frustrating, like the final level in Mario Wonder, for example, but it works here for me. For one, this only happens a few times in the game, so most of the time you get to progress and save like normal. And when this happens, you know it's a challenge, and you know you're going to be able to overcome it. And though they are challenging, it's generally a string of not too difficult things, with the main challenge being to remember what you need to do at each section and build up that muscle memory. It's extremely satisfying when you do pull it off, and man, what a rush of dopamine that is. The progression system of getting the ability points works really well. I was struggling with killing enemies like halfway through the game, just not doing enough damage to them. So I said screw it, and I went back to earlier sections of the map with my newfound abilities to collect some of the stuff that I couldn't pick up earlier. With that, I was able to upgrade my attacks and keep blasting through the game. I will say that sometimes there's a little too much that Ori can do, so I did find myself forgetting some of Ori's abilities randomly, Like I mentioned earlier with forgetting I could drop through certain platforms. Though, man, that's like one of the first things they teach you, so it's kind of embarrassing I forgot that. Just forget I mentioned this entire thing, okay? The art direction in this game, something else, man. It is absolutely gorgeous. I love 2D games because the limitation of 2D really forces the creators to get creative with their art and environments to make it feel full and alive. Anywhere you go gives you just a different vibe, right? Each area has its own visual cues that give you different sensations. The forest feels dark and oppressive. It's where Ori is from, but it's no longer home. The ruins feel desolate and decayed. They're gray and lonely, a shadow of the great civilization that once stood there. A fallen civilization, still littered with the bodies of the perished souls who once lived there. The volcano is hot and energetic, with tons of enemies and the absolute craziest platforming in the entire game. You feel this is the lifeblood of the land, the place that feeds and grows the forest around it, yet also has the ability to destroy it in a moment. With all that being said, I have to make an unfortunate concession. As gorgeous as this game is, I'll admit that Hollow Knight's art style does eclipse it in my own opinion. Something about Hollow Knight just feels so right. Every aspect of it sets such an interesting and deep tone. In a lot of ways, the spirit and story of Hollow Knight is the same as that of Ori's. You're in a dark, decaying world, one following a tragedy that the few remaining survivors are forced to grapple with. And Ori's art style is dramatically different from Hollow Knight's in that regard. Hollow Knight makes you feel the darkness that has overtaken this place. There doesn't seem to be any way to fix the hell that this place has become. It's sad and a bit overwhelming. There's a sense of pessimism constantly hanging over the world that tells you this place is dead. It's a corpse, and you can't just bring a corpse back to life. Ori, on the other hand, is energetic. It's hopeful. It's optimistic for the future. Yes, the forest has been severely wounded, and yes, the inhabitants of the forest have been irreparably scarred from this experience. But it can be fixed, and Ori is the one to do it. The world is much brighter than Hollow Knight's, and it only gets more lively as you play through the game. When you complete the first tower, the water goes from a dark, ugly purple to a clear and inviting blue. You can't even touch the water without being damaged at first, but you can swim to your heart's content once it's been cleaned. Once you restore the winds, there are little streams of wind all over the place that make the forest feel alive. It feels like you're in the lungs of a giant creature who can finally breathe again after being crushed. Now, with the state of the world being what it is today, the real world, I think there's a place for games and other media that takes a more optimistic approach in their world building and storytelling. Wars, inflation, open corruption, and the highest of institutions. You can hardly go on the internet nowadays without tripping over a crypto scam. Gambling is only getting further legalized, and all of our services are slowly being gamified along with it. The future is scary, man, but amid the fear is hope, and a sense that things will improve. I'm sure people were terrified and thought they were living in end times during every great civilizational collapse. And that's probably overselling the times we're going through now. I don't think civilization is actually collapsing, but it's fair to say our institutional values are weaker now than they've been, at least in my entire lifetime. But the world tends to recover from these events. There are those out there that remember the old ways, that recall the way things should be. From the ashes arise the greatest leaders. And that's what I think Ori gets at its very heart. Just because things are bad doesn't mean they have to stay bad. And as simple as a message that is, I think it's an important one to remember. Now let's get back to the, hypothesis of this, the thesis of the video. Is Ori actually a better Hollow Knight than Hollow Knight? No, of course not. That was clickbait. They're two completely different games that just happen to live in the same genre. Hollow Knight is a game that plays out completely differently, both from a storytelling perspective and from a gameplay perspective. I will say though, if you like one, you'll almost definitely like the other. Thanks for watching. If you like these types of videos, just game reviews and just random shit about Nintendo, consider liking and subscribing. I make videos, maybe like a couple times a week where I talk about games. I've been playing and just gaming related news in general. So anyway, yeah, I'll see you guys in a few days. Thank you for watching this video. Goodbye.